Welcome to Toxic Till the End, where we dive deep into the messy, heartbreaking, and unforgettable stories of love, loss, and everything in between. This is part 2 of my love story, the kind that felt invincible, the kind I was willing to risk everything for, until I realized love alone wasn't enough. So grab a drink, grab a snack, and let's get on with the story. So after returning from Mississippi, something between Colin and me shifted. It wasn't anything drastic, at least not at first. It was in the little things. At first, I didn't think much of it. It was more like, hey, I just happened to be in your area, or hey, I was just wondering, did you do the math homework? Or I was just driving by and I'd figure I'd stop by and say hi. It was things like that he would do. But when you look at someone long enough, pay attention to how long they've been doing it, and then you'll just know. And yeah, Colin had a crush on me. And the truth, I was starting to develop feelings for him too. So here's the thing about denial. You can lie to yourself all you want, but your heart always knows the truth before your mind catches up. Deep down, I knew how he felt. I knew it from the way his eyes lingered a little too long when I spoke, from the way he always found a reason to be around, from the way he protected me when I didn't even ask. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. So I would be saying, oh, we're just friends. This is how we've always been, or if anything happens, it'll ruin everything. And because of that was my biggest fear. So what do you do when the one person you can't afford to lose is the one person you can't stop thinking about? My parents were suspicious, and I completely understand, because when two people spend as much time together as Colin and I did, it's hard to not notice. At first, it was just nagging. They would say, why is he always around? Or what's going on between you two? Or you better not be doing anything behind our backs. But here's the thing. Nothing romantic had happened. We weren't sneaking around. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Not at that moment. And then fast forward, weeks passed. Despite our feelings growing, Colin was still dating Paige. Every time I looked at him, every time he lingered a little too long in conversation, every time our eyes met for a second too long, I knew, and he knew too. Some moments in life change everything. It's not always a grand event, not always something loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just a phone call. That day, when Colin called me, I could hear something different in his voice. There was a hesitation, a nervousness, and before he even said a word, I knew. I asked him what's wrong, and with hesitation, he said, I don't want to say anything that will mess this up. He was treading carefully, choosing his words as if one wrong word would shatter everything. And in that moment, I made a choice. Whatever it is, just say it, is what I said to him. And I said, I won't judge you. I'm on your side, no matter what. And I guess that was all he needed to hear, because the next thing he said changed everything. The 3 words that I had been waiting for was, I like you. He said, I like you so much that I can't stop thinking about you. And now that it was right in front of me, I couldn't lie anymore. So I told him the truth. I said to him, I feel the same way. There was a silence, then a relief. I could hear it in his voice. He was so happy. And for the first time, we said it out loud. There was no more pretending, no more second guessing, and no more just friends. But before we could even celebrate this new beginning, reality crept in because there was still one thing standing in our way. It was not the distance, not the time, not even Paige. It was our last names. Then came Sunday morning. After Sunday school, everyone made their way downstairs to the sanctuary. But before I could follow, one of the boys stopped me. He said, "Colin wants to talk to you, alone." And he told me where to go. It was a room at the end of the hall, and I hesitated, but I knew whatever was about to happen, it would change everything. I stepped inside and closed the door. He was standing in the middle of the room. He looked different. He was nervous, uneasy, and his hands were shaking. So I asked him what's wrong. He was bouncing back and forth between saying something and taking it back. And I wasn't dumb. I knew exactly what he was about to say. He said, "I like you. I want to be with you." I said to him, "I like you too." It was simple, but simple didn't mean easy. There were obstacles. And those obstacles were our parents, our culture. So in our culture, if a guy and a girl have the same last names, they cannot date or marry. No exceptions. It's not just about family ties, it goes way deeper than that. It's a clan thing. Even if there's no actual blood relation, it's still considered off limits, and that is just how it is. For a while, we went back and forth. Should we do this? Should we just stay as friends? What if we get caught? But at the end of the day, we both wanted the same thing. We wanted each other. But there was one thing I couldn't accept. Paige. I wasn't going to be the other girl. I wasn't going to share him. If he wanted to be with me, I needed to be the only one. So we made a promise, a secret just between us. No one could know. Not our friends, not our families, no one. So later that night, Colin called me. "I did it. I broke up with Paige," is what he said to me. And for a second, I felt relief, but there was also guilt. Because I felt selfish. Because for the first time, I realized I wasn't just thinking about me and Colin. I was thinking about her. She belonged to him and I took him away. I stayed quiet on the phone and Colin could sense it. He said to me, "Did you change your mind?" I could have walked away. I could have stopped this before it even began. But I didn't because I wanted him. A few weeks passed, and just like that, summer faded into fall. A new season, a new chapter, a new version of me. The fall of 2004 was my first year of high school. Walking through those halls for the first time, I felt small. Middle school was behind me and high school was my new reality. I was anxious, nervous, overwhelmed, but through all the chaos, I had Colin. So Colin was a junior, and in those early weeks, he became my safe place. Even though we couldn't talk during school hours, we found a different way to stay connected. Whenever I opened my locker between classes, I would receive handwritten letters from him. And my locker, well, it became a collection of memories. It wasn't just from him, but there were also from my friends as well. With everything going on between me and Colin, people started to notice. And, let's be honest, my friends, my close friends, they were not stupid. They saw the way he looked at me and the way I smiled at him. And that's when they started to question everything about him and I. They would say stuff like, "Are you two a thing?" Or, "Is something going on?" I denied it, over and over again because the truth, it was complicated. The only person I truly confided in was Annie. Remember Annie from episode 1? Well, guess what? We became best friends again. After a year of falling out, we left the past behind us and we made up. She was my best friend, my ride or die, the one person I trusted above everyone else. The thing about Annie was that she didn't judge me, she didn't push me, and she just listened. So when I told her about Colin and I, all she said was, "If you are happy, then I'm happy for you." Even if she didn't entirely agree with my choices, she was still there. And that's what real friends do. I then confided in Shelby, which was Annie's sister. She was worried about me, but she left it in my hands. And if being with Colin was what I wanted, then she wasn't going to stop me. So the thing about secrets is that secrets have a way of slipping through the cracks. And sometimes you don't even realize you've been caught until it's too late. And that's what happened with Lila, who was also from episode 1. She knew me and she knew Colin, but she did not know about us. Not until she saw the letters. So later in the day at school, we usually have study hall, and Layla and I were in the same study hall class. I was reading through another letter from Colin, which were his words, his feelings, and I felt a presence behind me. I turned my head, and there she was, Layla. She locked eyes on the letter, reading everything. That's when my heart dropped. I was caught, exposed, and the worst part, there was no way out of it. And the thing is that I could have denied it, and I could have laughed it off, but what was the point? Because she had already seen the truth. So I did the only thing left to do, was to come clean. So Layla's reaction was the way how I expected it. She wasn't mad, she wasn't judgmental, she was just worried. She knew this wasn't going to be easy and she knew there were risks, but instead of telling me I was wrong, instead of telling me to end it, she just said, "If this is what you want, then I'm not going to stop you." And that was it. Another person knew, another secret slipped, and little by little, the world around us started closing in. But here's the thing about secrets. They have a way of spreading. And soon, more people knew. I wish we had done a better job at keeping things low-key, just because looking back, I wish I had more control. I wish I had been smarter. But at 14 years old, when your heart wants what it wants, logically, it doesn't always win. So months passed, our relationship progressed, and we started skipping school. The moment my parents leave for work, we would sneak back into my house. And let me tell you, we engaged in activities that any parent would fear their child participating in. We had long makeout sessions to going to third base. Yes, he took my virginity. I think a lot of girls can relate to this, but as for my first time, it hurt. So according to my research, there are a few reasons, and those are physical factors, which the muscles may feel tight and the hymen can stretch or tear, which causes discomfort, but this varies for everyone. Second, lack of lubrication, which can cause friction and pain. Psychological factors, that means anxiety or tension that can make it harder to relax, which increases discomfort. So after our first time, we were active, but it wasn't always about that. It would be something like him quietly sneaking into my room at night, and we would cuddle until the early morning. Sometimes we met halfway and laid under the stars. Now looking back, I should have known better. But back then, I wasn't even thinking about consequences. I was thinking about Colin, about us, about how no matter what, we were going to find a way to be together. And for a while, we did. We were exchanging full on letters, pages of words, emotions, inside jokes, secrets, you name it. And every morning when I opened my locker, Colin's letters stacked on top of each other, and they were also mixed with letters from my friends as well. But the issue was that the pile was getting too big. So one weekend, I decided to take all the letters home and sort through them. I had one set of letters from my friend Annie, one set from Shelby, one set from Layla, and of course, one set for Colin. So his set were different. They were about us. And at first, I planned to hide them somewhere deep in my room, somewhere where no one would ever find them. But for some reason, I chose the worst possible spot. And that spot was to shove them under my pillow. Like that was enough. So that Saturday afternoon, I was on the computer, lost in whatever I was doing, when I heard my parents arguing. And at this point, their fights became background noise. It's something I had learned to ignore because they did that all the time. So my mom was yelling at my dad, and my dad just stayed silent most of the time. Eventually, he left for some church event. My mom decided to stay behind. And the thing about her is when she gets angry, she cleans. And while I was using the computer, I could hear her moving around, scrubbing, wiping things down, slamming cabinets. And I didn't think of anything. I just kept scrolling, blocking it all out until she shouted my name. So I slowly got up, walked down the hallway while my heart was pounding, and when I stepped into her bedroom, the worst nightmare was standing right in front of me. There she was, holding the stack of Colin's letters. I thought to myself, I messed up. I felt my entire body go cold. And I wanted to say something, anything, but the words just wouldn't come out. And when I looked at her face, it was twisted with anger, and her eyes looked like it was blazing. And then she started yelling, louder and louder. It was louder than when she fought with my dad. And before I could react, she took that stack of letters and smacked me across the face with it. That sting was instant. I just stood there. I didn't move. I didn't fight back. I sat there with my head down, silent. And then she started to cry. I cried. But the thing about me crying was that I didn't cry because of the pain. I cried because I felt ashamed. Ashamed that I got caught. Ashamed that I let this happen. Ashamed that my mom, my own mother, was looking at me like I was a stranger. So after all that, she sent me to my room and she kept the letters. And that night, when my dad came back home, she showed him everything. My dad came into my room to talk to me, and my dad is a gentle soul. So he didn't yell at me, he didn't hit me, he just walked into my room and then said in the calmest, coldest voice, "If you be with him, I will disown you, and you will not be my daughter anymore." And then he just left. The next day, I woke up to an even bigger nightmare. Colin's parents and my parents held a meeting at our house. I wasn't allowed to be there, but I heard everything from my bedroom. My mom, she laid out all the details, twisting them, making our relationship sound like it was the worst thing possible. and his mom was furious. His dad didn't spoke at all. He barely spoke. And I knew that when they got home, he was going to get it just as bad as I did. Maybe even worse. So after they left, my mom came into my bedroom and she sat on my bed and tried to bargain with me, basically saying that if I break up with him, she would pay for all of my recording sessions. Not for 1 second, I believed her. Because I was exhausted, I just wanted her out of my room, so I pretended to agree. And then the next day, my mom ran into his mom and she told his mom that I accepted the offer. And of course, his mom went home and told him about it. The next time I saw Colin, he looked broken and he confronted me. I could see the pain in his eyes, so I had to tell him, I had to make him understand. I swore to him that I never meant it, that I was just trying to shut my mom up, that I still wanted us. And despite everything, the fights, the threats, the manipulation, we stayed together. We were so dumb, we thought we could outsmart them. We thought we were stronger than their rules and we thought we were untouchable. But love wasn't enough. We had no idea what was coming next. Have you ever convinced yourself that love is enough? That no matter what the world throws at you, love will conquer all? I believed that as long as we held on to each other, we could survive anything. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't just me who believed it, he did as well. This love that we were holding on to, it wasn't a shield, and it sure as hell wasn't enough to stop what was coming. Looking back, we were desperate. We had already been caught, punished, shamed, but instead of breaking us apart, it made us even more determined. And that's when he came up with an idea. And that idea would change everything. He said he wanted to marry me. He believed that if we made it official, our parents would have no choice but to accept us. And the crazy part, I believed him. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the solution. Maybe for once, we would take control. So that morning, I skipped school again. But this time, I didn't sneak home. I went with him to his house. We spent the entire morning locked away in his bedroom. We were just whispering about the future, thinking what it would be like to wake up next to each other every morning. And the whole time we held each other, fingers intertwined as if letting go would make everything fall apart. Because deep down, we knew that what we had was on borrowed time. Then, it was 4 p.m. This was the moment everything changed. We heard the front door creak open, and then the shuffle of keys hitting the counter. So first his parents came home, then his siblings entered one by one into the house, and then he turned to me. He said, "Are you ready?" And I said yes. So he picked up his phone and dialed my mom. The whole time I sat there, my heart pounded, hands clammy, as he said to my mom the words that set everything in motion. He said, "I brought her to my house and we're together." There was silence, and then her anger exploded through the phone. Even though I couldn't hear her words, I felt them. She demanded him to give the phone to his mom, so he handed the phone over to his mom, and then his mom stormed into his room. I barely had time to react before she grabbed his arm. She was trying to pry him away from me. She was trying to pull us apart. The first thing she said was, "Let her go." But he refused. He held on to me like his life depended on it. And that's when she snapped. She looked around the room and her eyes landed on his boombox. Before I could even process what was happening, she yanked the cord out and started beating him with it right in front of me. And I sat there frozen. The whole time, my mind was screaming, saying, do something. But my body just wouldn't move. I sat there frozen while she was whipping him with that boombox cord. And she wasn't just hitting him, she was trying to break him. And from what I saw, he did not fight back. He didn't yell, he didn't even try to defend himself. He just took it. And all I wanted to do was scream to make her stop. But before I could do anything, she grabbed the phone again and she called Colin's aunt, saying I seduced her son, like I was some manipulative temptress who lured him into my mess. Like I wasn't just a girl who fell in love. After she hung up the phone, she ordered me to go to the other room. And I obeyed her, so I went to the other room. A few moments later, his dad came to get me and he sat me down. He didn't yell, he didn't hit me, but the way he looked at me was as if I was the reason his son was ruined, saying that what I did was unacceptable. And of course, I didn't respond, so I just sat there, staring at my hands, wishing and praying that I could just disappear. And then my parents arrived, and for a split second, relief flooded over me. I thought, okay, I could finally go home now. I could just get away from all this mess. But no, we were stuck there until nightfall. There was so much tension in the air while we were sitting in the kitchen. The adults argued, and voices were climbing higher and higher. And then his dad stood up, and before anyone could stop him, he got up and punched Colin in the face. Colin staggered back, and I saw him clenching his cheek, and in that moment, I saw defeat in his eyes. Before the night ended, the final decision was made. Colin was moving to Texas with his aunt, and we were never to see each other again. After all that, when we went home, I thought it was over, but it wasn't. My mom did the same thing. She grabbed something, anything, and beat me just as Colin's mother had beaten him. I felt every hit. The heat from my body went from my head to toes, over and over, until I collapsed. I was too exhausted to cry, and too numb to feel anything except the raw, burning pain. After all that beating, I laid in bed and I stared at the ceiling. I kept thinking to myself, I'm gonna end my life. Because if love wasn't enough, what was the point? But then I asked myself, would that change anything? I mean, would it bring him back to me? Or would it just give them what they wanted? So I made a choice. I'm not going to break. This wasn't going to be the end of my story. When something isn't meant to be, the universe will do everything in its power to tear it apart. But what happens when you fight back? When you believe with every fiber of your being that love can still win? I thought I had already lost him. But the universe wasn't done with us yet. It had one last moment to give us before it ripped us apart for good. So the night that my parents brought me back home, my parents forced me to sleep on the bedroom floor. And I was a prisoner. A world where they controlled everything. Where I could go, who I could see, and even where I could sleep. And it was all because of Colin. All because they thought they could break us apart. But what they didn't know was that he still came for me. So while on the floor of my parents' bedroom, I heard that soft, familiar knock at my bedroom window. Colin was there. He was waiting, hoping, and sadly I couldn't answer. I couldn't run to him like I always did. So I just laid there, curled up on the floor, silently crying myself to sleep. So the next morning, my mom forbade me from going to school, and she was determined, like obsessed, with keeping us apart. But I wasn't done. I snuck out, slipped past her bedroom door, ran down the street, my heart pounding, lungs burning. But when I got to school, he wasn't there. So I went on my merry way to my first class and acted as if nothing had happened the day before. And just as quickly as I had escaped, my mom pulled me out of school early. She wasn't going to take any more chances, and she was basically watching me like a hawk, tracking my every move. I had no phone, no internet, no way to reach him or my friends, and I was stuck with only my thoughts and my memories, and they were driving me insane. So days passed, then weeks. A week without seeing Colin was like torture. I did not know where he was or how far apart we were or if we were still in the same city. And my mind was spiraling because all I wanted to know was if he was okay. And I kept wondering, did he hate me for not meeting him at my window that night, or did he think I had given up on us? Like everything we had fought for was disappearing 1 second at a time. Then one night, a sound I thought I would never hear again. It was a knock at my window. I barely breathed as I lifted the curtains. And there he was, Colin. And the moment our eyes met, I threw the window open and hugged him. So tight. If I let go, he would disappear forever. And maybe I knew, deep down, this was it. This was the last time, so I held on longer than usual. I took in the scent of his jacket, the warmth of his skin, the way his heartbeat pressed against mine, and then he said, "I leave tomorrow." Yes, he was leaving, and there was no escape plan for us. No way to fight. The only thing he could tell me was that when he gets to Texas, he would mail me letters. And then he pulled something out from his pocket. It was a gold heart necklace. He bought a heart for me so I wouldn't forget him. And then we just sat together for what felt like forever. Neither of us wanted to break the moment because once we did, it was over. When he stood up, he said he had to go, and I could feel my chest tightening. Then tears started to burn my eyes and my heart begging me to say something, but I didn't because we both knew that there was no way out. So I did the only thing I could do was cry. I cried in his arms and he held me for the last time. It was painful. And yes, we said our goodbyes. And just like that, he was gone. Not just from my life, but from everything. All I had left was a memory and a gold heart necklace. After he moved, the letters became our only connection. It was the only proof that we had was still real, and with every word he wrote, I could feel how much he missed me. I missed him too. Those letters became my escape, my rebellion, and my little secret. But remember, secrets don't stay hidden forever. All the letters that I received from him, I hid them all the way in the back of my closet inside an old coat. Behind that closet was my private little world, and for a while I thought I was in the clear. Until one night, I was in the shower, not knowing what my mom's next moves were. She basically snuck into my room and she searched everywhere, hoping to find something. And guess what? She found the letters. The moment I stepped out of the bathroom, dripping wet, towel wrapped around me, I knew something was wrong because the energy in the house shifted. My mom was waiting for me. She was standing in the hallway, holding that stack of letters in her hand, and my heart dropped. And before I could even process it, before I could even explain, she snapped. This time she didn't yell. She didn't just lecture me about family reputation or how I was embarrassing them. She beat me again. And it was harder this time. And I took it. That was the night I realized she would never stop. Because her obsession with control, making sure I was the perfect daughter, I started to realize that my life was never about me. It was about them, about their image, their reputation. And I started to resent my parents for it, especially my mom, because everything was always about her. After that night, I had stopped writing to him. Not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. So I emailed him from my school library, telling him that we couldn't send letters to each other anymore. We tried calling each other using the payphone, but it was never enough. We only had 5 minutes here and there before someone else needed the phone or before the time ran out. It was like watching him fade into the distance. And day by day, his voice became harder to remember. His laugh, his scent, the way he made me felt, it all started to slip away. And for the first time, I was questioning if it was worth fighting for him. The day I realized I did not want to be with him anymore was during a random day at band practice. We were sitting in a circle and we were working on songs for Sunday service. And for some reason, something hit me. I looked at all of them and I thought to myself, these girls who seem so sure of themselves, they have nothing to hide. They were not trapped like me. And I started to feel disgusted with myself. Not with Colin, but with me, with whom I had become, and I knew I had to change. I knew I had to let go and break up with Colin. I was done being broken. I was ready to lift all this burden off my shoulders. I did it. I wrote a letter, the very last letter I would ever send him. But instead of pouring my heart into it, instead of telling him how much I loved him and how much I wanted to be with him and how much I missed him, I decided to end it. It was a cold, final letter, and I told myself I had to find a reason to hate him, to blame him, because if I didn't, I would never be able to move on. I knew that the moment he received my letter, he would be waiting for a love letter, a piece of hope, a piece of promise that we would make it through this. But instead, he got a breakup letter. The silence between us became real. There were no more calls, no more letters. It was over. Two years passed. I was completely over Colin. And just like that, I thought I had completely erased him from my life. And one thing I heard was that he had a new girlfriend. And guess what? She had the same name as me. Was that intentional? Was it his way of keeping a piece of me with him? Or was it just some weird coincidence? I don't know. But I do know that when I found out, I felt nothing. No anger, no jealousy, no heartbreak. Just nothing. I had truly moved on. But then, summer camp 2006 happened. It was our last summer together. And this year was our year. Our time to shine. Our final moments before we all went our separate ways. And just before camp, Colin came back. He and his brother showed up with our youth group. They were road tripping all the way to Missouri for camp, and for the first time in 2 years, I saw him. We did not exchange words at all. I could have talked to him. I could have said something, anything, but I didn't. I just stayed silent because some things are better left unsaid. Some chapters don't need to be reopened, and I had already closed this one. And that, my friends, is the end of this story. Some love stories don't end with a grand finale, a final conversation, or closure. Some just fade away. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that is how it's supposed to be. So if you've ever had to let go of someone you loved, you know how hard it is. But sometimes losing someone is the only way to find yourself again. So if this episode resonated with you, and if you've ever had a love that burned so bright only to fade into nothing, I just want to say that you are not alone. I know how it feels to love someone so deeply, only to watch them become a memory. And yes, it hurts because it changes you. But I want you to remember this. You are more than the love you lost. You are whole, even without them. And you are strong, even in your weakest moments. So no matter how much it feels like the pain will never go away, I promise you one day it will. You'll wake up and realize that your story didn't end with them. It's still being written. And the next chapter is yours to create. Alright guys, that is it for today. I hope you guys stay strong, stay true to yourself, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Toxic Till the End.